No. God, this is a hard one to cover because there's just no way to say this politely. Number 2. So, the surprise round, bonus round for Walden. 250 pages, of which I was 130 some odd pages into it. I think it's both thick and grueling in some areas because of the writing style, but at the same time it's got plenty of little pearls of wisdom and plenty of little gems to polish up into new ideas. It's just I'm focusing on the new ideas approach. The pearls of wisdom I'm accumulating on my own on the side for my own purposes, but yeah, so I thought I'd do a second part for this because I got 6 for the first half of it at least, for ideas to pursue further, and I wanted to kind of do the whole thing, not just kind of cut halfway through and just leave it hanging, but definitely give it a look. I will see you on the other side of the continued work. More ideas and inspiration from Walden. So, having looked at the second half, I do have to think either the second half got better or I got more used to it. But it's still a long-winded way to talk about the topic for conveying ideas or inspirations or anything like that. But as a sort of a love letter to wilderness and nature, I think I would see this as a better means of meditating on nature in small installments when you have time to sit out amongst it and think about it. It's not really a read through in a day or kind of thing, but saying that, let's get back to the ideas and inspirations. Like I said earlier, I think there are a lot of worthy quotes and thoughts that don't necessarily translate over to ideas for taking things further. I built a document of things I thought were worthy of taking notes on and things to look back on, as well as the 12 things that I got away from this for pursuing further. Getting into those parts. This one's kind of interesting because we don't usually get this kind of thing, but there's a scene in here, not really a scene, but a section in one of the chapters where he talks about a game he's playing with a loon on the lake. And he talks about how he rows his boat towards the loon, and the loon goes underneath the water, and he has to try to guess where that loon is going to pop up. And I got to thinking, this could be an interesting board game. It might be a little tricky to design the mechanism to do it with. But yeah, he refers to it as playing a game of checkers, where the player goes underneath the board and you have to guess which direction they're going to pop up in and try to get up alongside them before they do. And so I think that would be totally worthwhile to try to design a game to do that, where one player plays underneath the board and one player plays on top, and you're trying to kind of catch each other by going up parallel to the movements of the other player. I don't know if you're trying to get from one side of the board to the other and stop them from doing that, or touch certain points around the board in a sequence and catch the other player doing it. It sort of bothered me a little, but there's a section in the story where it's talking about the savages before civilization came to them, and specifically he talks about how all savages ate other human beings before we civilized them, or something to that effect. But the concept comes to me of writing a story in which it is the conquering civilized people that are the cannibals, and they're trying to convert the uncivilized savages to the proper civilized ways. And I gotta wonder if there's a way to write a story of a semi-advanced civilization that imagines itself the pinnacle of civilization, and part of that is to eat their own. How you decide who gets eaten, I'm not sure. That's a different issue altogether. This one's for just a painting style. It's an idea that's come up in some stories before, where you get like a personality bestowed on a fire somewhere in a story. In this case, Walden talks about the sort of companion of his home being the fire that he has, and it's sort of, he really makes somewhat of a big deal of being friends with the fire he has in his hut, his building, on his hearth. And I think some of the imagery of, or at least just kind of the way he talks about the relationship, kind of gives me an imagery of a human-formed figure within a fireplace made out of fire, and the kind of connection, trying to catch that in an image. And I think it would be fun to either paint it, or if you could do some exposure tricks and color and body paint tricks to do some photography, and then post-edit the images to give it a sort of ethereal fire being form. It would be, I think that would be a fun image to try to build. And I may have to, I don't know enough about image editing software, but I may have to learn to try to get some of those ideas through. Okay, he does a lot of talking about some of the wildlife in the forest, as if they have these amazing abilities. He talks about a squirrel that can kind of seem to be in one place at once and pop into existence in another without really having seen them gone from one place to the other. He talks about a fox that's able to walk along a wall or climb a wall easily, and I got to think, like, he doesn't quite say it that way, but it's almost like Spider-Man climbing a wall, and I gotta wonder if there's a fox that could just walk along vertical surfaces. And there's a mention of a mouse that could eat a whole tree, and he means something different by this, where the mouse ate a ring around the base of the tree that ended up killing the whole tree. But the way he phrased it to start with was that a mouse eats a whole tree, and so I had this image of this tiny little mouse just eating a whole pine tree. And at another point, he's talking about a sparrow that, when the ice is melting on the pond after winter, the sparrow's singing is what's helping it crack. And I got to think that this would be a fun twist. Like, first of all, you could do it as like you could do it as sort of like mystic fountains within a forest that bestow abilities on nature spirits, or you could do it as like a version of the Fountain of Youth, but instead of youth it bestows powers. You could do it as a druid living in the forest, summoning power to imbue the animals with abilities to defend the forest against invaders. My personal favorite take on the idea is, we hear all those comic book stories about like certain characters who are hit by toxic waste and it blinds them but gives them special abilities, or you're bitten by a radioactive spider, or like basically mutagenic compounds that bestow powers on characters. And you gotta wonder, it can't always just be some guy on a city street that gets these abilities because they're hit by a dropped canister on the street. The drainage ditches that run to lakes, the people who dump waste in lakes and ponds. You gotta wonder, do the squirrels and chipmunks and birds get developed powers and nobody's ever mentioned it before? So I thought that was sort of a fun idea to do that. he talks about at one point when spring starts to come up that you can look at a plant, turn away for a minute, and turn back and see it's changed within minutes. And he says he feels like he's wandered into the workspace of the person who paints the trees and animals to life, and or sculpts. And I mean, at one point he also talks about how nature is so plastic; it's constantly being resculpted over and over again. And I got to thinking, like, it's a good metaphor, and there's a sense that there would be a worthy story to talk about a being who does these things, not from the point of finding them as their creator. It's not like the character in your story meets their creator, but more in the sense of a character whose responsibility it is to shape and create some of the parts of nature that we just take for granted as being there, and sort of see as they make their creations how in our current way of living those creations are encountered and oftentimes quarantined into their own little reserves and then quietly smothered by the forces of incoming humanity. And I gotta wonder if there's a certain point somebody who creates and sees their things smothered and wiped out as encroaching humanity comes in, if there's a reaction to that. Is there sad desperation for saving their creations, or is there just a megalomaniacal supervillain mode that this person finally just hits after being put too far? He does a little bit of a parable based, I think, on some of the Indian myths that he refers to, where a character leaves a city or a kingdom or an empire, and he's going in search of a staff, and it's supposed to be a metaphor for when you're laboring for something you are passionate about, nothing ages you. You are ageless as you pursue your passion. But the way he phrased it was something that gave me the idea of a story about a person who leaves a kingdom on some mystical quest, a guise that he's set upon to find a staff for whatever reason, whatever cause. And while he's on the quest, the people who are his aides, or the people from the empire that follow him in this quest, they wither away and they age and they're gone, but he continues ageless on his quest, seeking this staff. It's his single purpose, his single-minded quest for this. And during his little statement of this story, the implication is that the kingdom for which he's doing this quest crumbles into ruins while he's on this quest, and it proceeds that he has to continue on the quest no matter what. And the new kingdom rises on the ruins of the old one, rises, reaches his pinnacle, and collapses again while he's on this quest. And eventually he finds the staff, and when he achieves the goal in this story, the result ends that he finds he's lived a lifetime in that quest, many lifetimes in that quest, and yet no time has passed in the world. And so it's kind of a reversal of the whole living for ages on a quest. I think there are ways that perhaps, like if you're doing a mystical story, that the staff is a doorway back to the time that you left behind. And now that the kingdom that you were in at the time no longer exists, the purpose to which the kingdom sent you on this quest for the staff no longer exists. The power of the staff is a means to get back the things that you left behind in your search, that left you searching for millennium. So, alright, so that was the second bonus round on Walden there. I will be back for the next episode, which will be a movie. See you then.